Now to talk more about all of this is Democratic Senator Chris Coons on the Foreign Relations, Judiciary and Appropriations Committees. A lot on your plate today, but let's start with North Korea. What is the rationale for letting Americans travel to North Korea when this
Andrea,
is the kind of thing that they will do?
Andrea, after this tragedy, after this assault on an American by North Korea, which, as you've just pointed out, will be very hard for us to hold them accountable for in any specific and concrete way, I question why anyone would be continuing to run groups, to take students, to take exchange programs into North Korea. This assault on Otto Warmbier by the North Koreans when he was in their custody that led to his death has been called out by a number of my colleagues, both Republicans and Democrats here in the Senate today, as tantamount to murder of an American citizen. I am encouraged that we're pressing for the release of the 3 remaining Americans in North Korean custody. But this just highlights the fact that we don't have a functioning strategy. At the same time that the Trump administration has urged all of us here in the Senate, I'll remind you, they brought the entire Senate over to the White House to brief us on their strategy with North Korea, and they urged us to join them in creating more and more pressure on China for China to take tough action against North Korea. But we're also currently considering a budget proposal from the Trump administration that would slash the funding for our diplomats around the world by 1/3. That's going to make it very difficult for us to actually carry through on a strategy that relies on encouraging our allies and our partners around the world to join us in imposing sanctions and increasing pressure on the North Korean regime.
Senator, I wanted to play a little bit of an audio clip from Bloomberg News on May 1st. This is the president speaking about being willing to welcome Kim Jong-un to Washington to a meeting in the Oval Office.
If it would be appropriate for me to meet with him, I would be honored to do it.
Senator, there may have been a signal intended. We can't know that because almost shortly afterwards, there was a meeting in Oslo between Ambassador Jo Yun from the State Department and the North Koreans, I believe Madam Choi, who is their North Korean nuclear negotiator. So there have been back-channel negotiations, not only by this administration, ordered by the president in February, but also, according to Secretary Kerry, for months, at least a year preceding that. So we don't know if this was a signal, but the president seems to be running hot and cold on North Korea.
That's right. Andrea, one of the challenges of international diplomacy and of working closely with our allies in the era of President Trump is his unpredictability. He has taken not slightly different positions on important issues, not a little hot, a little cold, but wildly different positions on things like the One China policy, our support for Japan and South Korea, our engagement with NATO, our commitment to Article 5, first as a candidate, then during the transition, then in his early months as president. President Trump has taken significantly different positions on central issues to U.S. foreign policy. I was recently at a regional security conference in Singapore with Senator McCain, Senator Barrasso, Republican colleagues, and we heard from a dozen of our allies and partners in the region that this unpredictability, this uncertainty about exactly where we're going to come down because of President Trump's shifting positions and statements is making it harder for us to project strength and to show a clear direction and a clear determination in standing up to the threat from North Korea, in standing up to Russia's intervention in our last presidential election, and in charting some clear path forward in Syria, a very difficult and conflicted battle space right now.
And Senator, I also want to ask you about Russia, because the U.S. and Russia have gone up against each other in Syria now, and today the Russians buzzed one of our surveillance planes over the Baltics. Only yesterday they said they were cutting off the hotline, the deconfliction line, because we shot down a Syrian plane. This is really heating up. What are your concerns?
Well, I'm very concerned that we don't have a strategy yet from the Trump administration. We had a bipartisan hearing earlier today on foreign relations to look at an authorization of the use of military force that would focus us on our work against ISIS. We have American troops on the ground in Syria. We have American pilots in the air. And these recent incidents where American pilots shot down an Iranian drone, shot down a Syrian Assad regime Russian fighter jet, they have heightened the tension. And I'm gravely concerned that we may be slipping into a hot war with Assad's forces, with Iran, or even with Russia. And we need a clear strategy from the Trump administration, both for how we're going to move forward in fighting ISIS on the ground in Syria, and for what our strategy is in Afghanistan. And in both of these places, there are secondary risks with regard to Russia if we don't have clear lines of understanding and clear lines of authority. Congress needs to step up and do its job in getting a modernized authorization for military force, but that authorization should only be coming once we've got a clear strategy from the administration.
And I know you've got to go, I've got to go, but just asking every senator I run into, have you seen the Senate health care bill yet?
Nope. And that is the biggest news here on the Hill, that the content, of the Republican health care bill, their attempt at repeal and replace for Obamacare, is being kept secret from every Democrat and from some Republicans. The idea that this big and important bill would be rolled out in a last-minute secret reveal is more reminiscent of a Trump reality TV show than of regular order. And it doesn't have to be this way. When the Affordable Care Act was passed, there were weeks of hearings at the committee level. There were more than 150 Republican amendments accepted into the bill as it worked its way through regular order. Democrats stand ready to work with Republicans to address the challenges, the problems with the Affordable Care Act. We should be working on this in an open and bipartisan way, rather than having the Republicans trying to jam through a secret bill that their own members don't even know about, and that President Trump recently denounced the House version as being mean. I think there are real concerns from my state and from folks all over the country about what's hidden in this secret bill.
Thank you very much, Senator Coons. It's always a pleasure. Thanks for being with us today.